Hello, hello, hello. All right, I think we are live. Oh, testing, testing. All right, I think we are live. Not sure if there's anyone here. I'm gonna check the chat, but please let me know if you can see me. All right, I have the chat right next to me, and everything seems to be indicating that we are live. Cool. All right, thanks, Eman. All right, so everything is good to go. Cool. So welcome, guys, to the stream. We are going to be looking at some tips and tricks, things that I want to share with you about comic rendering. So that is the whole idea, the whole purpose of the live stream. Just give me 1 second. I'll bring in some reference here just to give you an idea. Again. So I want to show you kind of like a bit of the behind the scenes on some of the images that I have here. This is just a series of mockups that I've created. Let me just also turn off my camera so you can see the full screen of this. There we go. Yeah, so this is just a series of mockups that I've set up from some of the illustrations that I've created in the past. Most of these ones are personal work. Some of them are for courses and things that I've released in the past. This one, the one in the center, this character, I'm going to be showing you this as well. This is for a contest that we currently have on Discord. And I'll ask Eman to help me find the Discord link and just post it in the chat in case anyone is interested to just to participate. And yeah, basically the idea is you have time until the end of May, and yeah, you get some really cool prizes and get to share a bunch of cool stuff. Let me just I'm just trying to find the hang on. Here we go. All right, let me just show you this as well. This is the character that I was talking about. But yeah, here's the Discord. So these are some of the work in progress that everyone is like sharing. So you can just join Discord, and it is free to join. You can participate either making a villain or a superhero character, and the idea is to do it in that sort of X-Men '97 theme or the Invincible series, that sort of stuff. So that's the main idea. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this live stream, to show you some tips and tricks so that you can render and produce this sort of stuff. So if you're interested, I'll show you as well a little bit of how I made this mockup. It's pretty simple. It's a Blender file that I set up, and I brought in some of my assets that I will also show you. So you see, this is a character done in ZBrush, and at the back here, a little bit out of focus, you can see the render as well that is done entirely in ZBrush, so that I use that to create the render in 3D or like the comic style render. And this one as well, this is one from one of the ZBrush for Illustrators intensive course. This is another course that I have online where I literally show you exactly how I build this entire illustration in ZBrush and Photoshop, and then I grab the simple assets, the 3D assets, like the this sort of like mothership thing and the character, the astronaut, and just put them into in a physical space, let's say. But yeah, so I'm gonna show you a little bit of that, but also here's the kind of like a simple breakdown of what that illustration looks like. So this is literally what I use to render that illustration in ZBrush. Can I turn on my mic up? I think it's at the maximum. Hang on, let me just do a double check. Yep, it's at the... Yeah, that I cannot go higher than this, so it might be your speakers or headphones. Let me know, everyone, if you can hear me all right. So going back to what I was saying, this is the scene or the ZBrush file that I use to produce that illustration. And yeah, so basically what you see here is what you get really from a render in that sort of like comic style in ZBrush. So it's pretty cool. One of the things that I that I kind of like of this process that I'm going to show you is that the the model itself doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to be the most amazing detailed object. In fact, going for something that is highly detailed with all high frequency details and all of that is actually detrimental for the look and feel. So you see, this character is pretty basic. Even the rocks here are like a little bit polished. So it's very it's very basic. But when you applied the comic style material and the matcaps, you can end up with something like this. This is already the refined version of the sketch. So after exporting the final kind of like outline, I went ahead and refined it a little bit. And once this is done, this is with all the colors and everything. So like I said, this is part of an intensive course called the ZBrush for Illustrators. I will also leave a link or share a link to that as well. And I'll show you as well. Let me find it. So I'll put it in the chat. But just in case you're curious, I'm gonna share it here. So this is the course that I'm talking about. So like I said, I cover everything. All you need is ZBrush and Photoshop, and that's it. I'm gonna put this in the chat, so you have to it. And yeah, so with that out of the way, this is kind of like what I wanted to show you. I'm also going to show you a little bit of, the characters, like the 3D objects that I use to create this type of illustrations. So this is Spidey illustration. This character is actually a 3D guy, and I just did the render, and obviously the rest is just Procreate and Photoshop, having fun with colors and shapes. But the character itself, or the main object of these illustrations, is 3D, and it's just a render. And all of this as well. So this is these three guys, so this weird stuff, these are part from a series that I'm doing. It's called the Rosetta Centurions, or the Land of Centuria. So the idea is like there are like three different scientists, like there are priests. So and they're like weird. Some of them are like more technological. The other one is more like humanoid. The other one is just like a droid type of thing. But all of these guys, the characters are done in 3D with ZBrush. Very, very basic stuff, and then rendered in the same style. So a couple of different styles that I like to create this type of things, like more I wouldn't say, I don't know exactly what the type of style would be, but it's more like Moebius type of thing rather than this in general. So but I want to show you that the process is basically the same thing. All right, so enough talking. Let's go ahead and jump into some of the practical bits. So what I have here is this, I called it Virtuoso. It's kind of like a guide on this the hero or superhero character, and the power is that he can sort of project virtual reality into people's mind and that sort of thing. But anyway, so I use to create this, just as a quick reference, I use Character Creator 4 just to set up the base model, and then I just sculpted and added a bunch of things on top, and then I added Polypaint as well. So let me just switch to Skin Shade 4. So this is the full character, and then I obviously posted and all of that, but then once I have this, once I have Polypaint, once I have the sculpt ready, I can just go ahead and enable this matcap. This is a custom matcap that you can also get from the ZBrush guide as well. So you can download it for free. It's called the Super Comic, or the Pablander Super Comic 2022. I'll walk you through this one as well. But this one is just enough to create the renders, and 90% of the time, this is what I use to produce my my comic style renders. So all you have to do is just switch from the material that you're working on to sculpt and to add details and all of that, and then just turn this on, and you see you get a pretty nice render. Now, if this has, if I were to add a lot of details into this character, let me just go ahead and do that just to give you an example. So if I go, which is this is another tip that you might find useful. If you want to add high frequency details to something that has UVs, all you have to do is enable surface noise and just add, kind of like a pattern here. Let's see if I can. Let me see if I can find something like a fabric. I'm gonna go to my resources, alphas. Let's see. All right, I'm just gonna add something for the sake of showing you. So because this character has UVs, I can click UV. I'm gonna turn the noise scale to 0. The alpha scale, this is literally this little image here that can be tiled. So I'm gonna increase that. I'm gonna reduce the basic noise mix and increase the strength. All right, I'll have to reduce the scale actually. There we go. So you see the effect. This is kind of like a needed sort of pattern. So it doesn't really go with the style of the character, but I just wanted to show you. You just need to have a tileable texture here. Play around with these sliders like I just did here, as long as you have UV. Click OK, and then you'll see you have a lot of details. And this is just a kind of like a preview, so you can click noise, turn on and off to visualize it. And if you want to apply it to the model, you can just click on apply to mesh, but I don't think I have enough resolution. Let me just see. Oh, it's not too bad. But yeah, so you can just leave it as noise, and you don't have to apply it. Now, the point that I'm trying to make here is that you can create like amazing details in ZBrush. That's what ZBrush is kind of like known for, that you can apply all of these really cool details. But when it comes to rendering a character for, or anything really, for a illustration in comic style, this doesn't look as good. So if I enable the comic style, you see, I mean, it looks all right, but it's a bit noisy. It's a bit too much, right? So you get a lot of like, you know, this high frequency detail information. It might be what you're looking for, but in my opinion, it might be, no, it might, like I said, might be detrimental, and it might be a bit too noisy for the, you know, for the patterns, and just to visualize this as the final illustration. Especially if the character is going to be small. You see, it just looks like it's noise. Like it doesn't feel intentional in a way. So that's one of the main things that I wanted to cover. That when it comes to creating illustration or using this sort of comic style, just try to go for something that make sure that the blocking is right and the details are subtle, so that you don't have to go that high in terms of the amount of details that you're gonna have, right? So you see some of the lines that I created, they're, you know, intentionally just done in a way that it sort of like highlights the different panels or different areas of the suit, but they're not everywhere, right? So that's one thing. All right, and I'll show you other bits and pieces that I have here. And like I said, I have the chat right next to me, so if you have questions about what I'm showing you, feel free to put them in the chat. Let me actually just have a look. Cool, all right. Awesome. Cool. So I'm going to show you the other character that I did. So the idea is just to create kind of like a villain and a superhero. So this is kind of like the nemesis of Virtuoso. This one is, can't remember how I called it. I think Lizardo or something. Yeah, Lizardo or something like that. So this is a kind of like a lizard character type of thing, but it's like you know, the typical bulky guy that smashes things. And you know, I made it with like a super tight suit, but again, just to show you that once you have like the base and you start adding these sort of details like the folds, you know, it becomes like a really easy kind of like a thing to not to fake, but to produce those more intricate details in a comic style, right? So I wouldn't say that this is the cleanest or the most perfect, you know, concept sculpt as a 3D sculpt, but it works great for the comic style render. So if I get closer here, you see I have all of these lines that you know, they definitely could be polished a bit more. Even this thing here is not like perfect, like the corners are not great. You know, the folds, by the way, let me just do a little branching out here for the folds, because this is something that I got asked as well. I did that with a custom brush that I use all the time. So this is a custom brush that I built precisely to do this type of thing. So I can do, hang on, let me select that one. This one is called the compression folds. So I can do these things really quickly and then smooth that out and then produce really nice folds. And you know, it's just like a sculpting brush, so I can just have directionality and decide where this thing goes. So for example, with this one right here, I can add some folds like that. You know, becomes really easy. But this is just one of, you know, a bunch of different brushes that I use for this type of stuff. So if you're interested in that specific set of brushes, hang on, I lost the mask. Where's the mask? There we go. So if you're interested in these type of brushes, you can go to the ZBrushGuides.store. I'll put a link as well here, or I'll ask Eman if he can share some of that. But I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'm just covering this because I did get a couple of questions about this specific process. So these are some of the brushes that I have online, just brushes pack of like $15 or something. So the one that I'm using is from the cloth and drapery pack. So if you double click on that one, you see there's a bunch of different brushes that I set up for this purpose. They all do different things. The one that I'm using is this one, this compression fold. I use this one all the time for anything to do with, compression folds. But there's another one just for the sake of demo here that is pretty interesting. So these ones right here that have this little icon with a curve are pretty cool. So I'm gonna use this one for example. And what this one allows you to do is create like large folds, but with a bit more control. So you literally drag a curve, right? So they're just painting that curve, and then you just pull that curve out. Hang on. Oh, sorry. We need to select the body, obviously. All right, let's do it again. So here's the curve. No, this is not the one that I want to show you. I mean, this one is good, but I want to show you a different one. I have like quite a few of these. I think this is the one. Yeah, so you basically draw the curve, and then you can pull that, and then you can continue adding to it. And then you can just add another one, pull a little bit, add another one, and so on and so forth. So that's the cool thing about these brushes. This one that I showed you at the beginning is the same thing, but when you draw it, it will already create that. The cool thing about this one is that you can continue to move that curve, right, to add to it. If this happens, it sort of like inverts it. You can just press Alt and click to switch back. There we go. Oops. You can also pull it down just to add more to it. You can press the Shift key to smooth that curve. So you have a lot of control over the curve itself, and is the curve the one that is sort of like generating that fold or that fold. So when you click again, you can add multiple ones like so. Anyway, that's not the the point of this stream. I just wanted to show you because I did get a few questions about it when I shared the process of this guy. So those are the brushes that I use, but the rest is pretty much the same. All right. Hang on. Let me 1 second. All right, sorry. Cool. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys could hear me. Okay, so now if I take this guy and I just go ahead and enable my comic style render, there we go. We have a pretty decent outline. And I'm also going to switch the background. So I'm using my custom UI, but you can change the background from the color, from the document, and click on this back and select this one right here. Right. So yeah, Eman, if you have a chance, please share the resources to the ZBrush Guide store. I don't think that the link worked for some reason, so I don't see it. Let me know, guys, if you see it, because I don't see it. I'll share it here as well myself, just in case, because I don't see it in there. Anyway, so yeah, so now with the background and this sort of like color, it does look a little bit more like a comic style render. One thing you can do is, you see that the color itself is a bit gray. This is intentional for the simple reason that that if you have polypaint, I set up this material so that you can also have polypaint. So if I enable polypaint, oh, this guy doesn't have it. Let's go back in here. If I enable polypaint, you can see a nice color of the polypaint. But If you want to get rid of it, basically if you want to create just a nice clean outline, all you have to do is in the material palette, and this is where we're going to start tweaking the materials a little bit. In the material palette, you have these 4 slots, and these are the 4 sort of like sections or shaders or materials that make up the entire effect of this character, or not the character, but the outline. So if you turn them all off, you start from this one that is just kind of like a very plain, almost like a contrasted skin shade for. But then you have the other ones that add the outline. Then it adds this strong outline, and then this outer outline. So basically, if you don't want these super strong shadows, you can turn off S3, and that gives you kind of like a cleaner outline. But the one that I was talking about is in S1. This, because you can see a little bit of the volumes around here. What you can do is take the diffuse and push that forward, and just adding a little bit more of diffuse that makes it more contrasted and just adds that to white. By default, it's not, but I just wanted to show you how you can quickly edit that. The other thing that you can do with this, let's turn them all back on. Let's say that if you like this look with the strong shadows in certain areas, but you want to increase the reach of those shadows, if you want to make them thicker, for example, what you can do is in the third one is that one that gives you that sort of like thick outline. You can do 2 things. You can edit the actual image that I have here, which is this one right here. So this is driven by a matcap. And in case you don't know or not familiar with matcaps in ZBrush, they're just materials that are driven or that use an input image. So this image right here. So you can do 2 things. One is change that image completely, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. Or you can use the depth A and depth B, and those depths are basically to change, kind of like it's kind of like a pinching or inflate for this. So in other words, let me just show you with a sphere. Because this is the best and easiest way to understand matcaps in ZBrush. So basically, this sphere, or this sphere, it is an exact duplicate of what this image looks like, right? If I turn off my background, right, and let me turn this off, you won't be able to see it. Yeah, that's right. That's okay. Anyway, so this is an exact duplicate of what I have here in my image, right? But if I go ahead and change this depth A to, let's go for 1.2 and 1.2, you see how it kind of like pinches everything, and the shadow sort of like becomes a bit more prominent. The same thing if I go for 0.2 and 0.2, it just inflates that. So it just changes the amount of shadow that you get in there. So that is the same thing if I go back to my character here. You see now this doesn't look as strong. So you can start doing this maybe 2 and 2, and now we have like a really strong sharp shadow. You can also have different values in A and B, and that creates that sort of like third, kind of like posterized effect. So the depth A could be, 0.5. Sorry, 0.5. So the depth A gives you the initial sort of darker shadow here, and then the depth B gives you that sort of gray look, which is pretty cool. So you can combine and play with this, just 2 depths to change how everything looks. Maybe you want something like that for whatever reason, or you can just have like a stronger shadow or not at all. So I just wanted to mention this because I know a lot of people that have downloaded or have acquired this material. Again, it is free in the ZBrush Guides website, but just want to make sure that you know that the capabilities of that material. Obviously, straight out of the box, as soon as you download it, it works. But there's a lot of things that you can do within the material itself to tweak it a bit. So I think I'm happy with what I had, which is I think 0.6 and 0.6. Yeah, something like that. It gives me a clean line that I can use. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and show you a couple more examples. Usually the same thing, using the same material, but I want to also cover some of the rendering techniques, so BPR filters and all of that, because there are a lot of fun, and you can just create something. You can be very, very creative when it comes to creating those filters. I think someone asked about the resolution of the villain model. So this guy here, the resolution, if you mean like the total points, I think I have like about 4 million polygons. It's not that much. Yeah, so 4 million polygons. Actually, before I move on, well, let's just go ahead and go through the examples and then I'll come back. I don't want to deviate too much from what I had planned for this. Okay, so this is another example. So this is my take on Miles Morales, the the Spider-Verse character. I'm gonna go into solo mode just to show you the full body. And again, I have my comic material enabled, so this is already the comic sort of style, right? But if I go back, this is kind of like what the model looks like. I wanted to show you this one because the entire body, or like the color that you see here, the texture that I created, is actually a texture. So you can use polypaint, but you can also create textures. So you can build the textures somewhere else, let's say Substance 3D Painter, if you wanted to, for example, bring them in as a texture file. So if I go to the texture palette, texture map, this is the map that I have for this character. So you can totally do that. You can use the texture map to apply it to the model, and enabling the matcap or the super comic material, and it's still going to work exactly like polypaint. The other objects I think I use polypaint for, so the same thing. Yeah, so pretty easy stuff. There is a reason why. In fact, let me just turn off the textures for a second. There is a reason why I sculpted these in a specific way, just so I can have those nice contrasted lines in the comic, right? So if I switch back to this one, you see something like the shoulder, like the deltoid. It has these very clean and sharp lines, because I wanted to have like a little bit of a reference of these the anatomy, but not too obvious. So again, this is something that probably just comes with practice, in terms of like what to do or how many details to add for the comic. But you'll see that from some angles, I just have like these very subtle lines. That's one thing that I was going for this stylization. But anyway, this is just another example of how quickly you can create something that looks cool for comic style render in a much more stylized character. Let's switch to the Land of Centuria, the scientist here. These are the ones that, in case you weren't here at the beginning of the stream, this type of guys right here. So the one that I'm showing you is this one in the middle. This is exactly the same model that I have, or that I use for that render. And I think the most crucial thing to show you is that I use Sculptris Pro. In case you're not familiar with Sculptris Pro, it's just a tool in ZBrush that allows you to explore shapes, and that's generally what I do with these type of weird concepts and more surreal stuff. And you don't have to worry too much about topology and that sort of thing. Now, this one, if you look closely, it's kind of like faceted. It has like these polygons all over the place. So if I enable polyframe, let's turn off fill, this is the actual mesh that I use for the render. So this is a decimated model, right? So it doesn't have much detail, and in fact, like the topology is, all decimated, so it's not great. You have all of these tiny points and tiny polygons. It's not perfect, but this is one of the main things that I would like to, to show you with this process, that it doesn't have to be 100% perfect in terms of the sculpt itself. As long as the silhouette works, the proportions and the primary shapes, you're pretty much good to go. So yeah, so this is a very simple model, and it is being simplified even more by using the Decimation Master. If you don't know what the Decimation Master is, I'll show you in a second when ZBrush lets me do it. Decimation basically means that let's go ahead and do something here, just as a quick example. So I have a sphere here that has 130,000 polygons or points. I can go ahead and use I'm going to use a standard, something stronger than the standard brush. And this is literally what I did with that concept. So I'm going to enable symmetry, and I'm going to enable a Sculptris Pro. So this one right here. This one, by the way, if you don't know what that is, stroke, let's collapse all of that. You can go to Sculptris Pro and enable it from here. And what this does, if I enable my mesh, is as I sculpt, you see it generates polygons just where I have the stroke, basically, right? So it keeps generating this nice topology. Well, it's not a nice topology, but it's just nice to sculpt like that, because you don't have to worry about the underlying topology. It just creates these nice sort of clean lines. But yeah, that's basically it. So that's what I did with that character. And obviously, the more of these that you add, or the smaller the brush size, the smaller the details, the more resolution you're going to end up with. So now I have 283,000. So if I go smaller than this, right, now I'm going to have like smaller details and obviously smaller points, as you can see here. But all of this happens automatically, so you can just do that with the with the size of the brush. So you can control the amount of details just by changing the brush size. But now I have 400,000, right? So the point here is, obviously in ZBrush you can have millions of polygons. That's not a problem. The choice that I make to make this a decimated model is because when I click on the comic style render, you see I get all of these interesting and tiny little lines, kind of like for free in a way. So this is intentional. That's the reason why I decimated, because when you decimated ZBrush, and you decimate it to a very low percentage or very low value, ZBrush will create these polygon lines, as you can see. And some of them are pretty prominent and pretty strong. So what I do is, when I do the render, I will be able to sort of like capitalize on this in a way and do tweaking of the outline. So that is pretty cool, right? So just in case you don't know, I'm gonna do it with this one. All you have to do to decimate a model, you can go to the C plugin palette. Let's go ahead and check that here on the right hand side. Decimation master, here we go. Yeah, this one, the one I have open. So the first thing you need to do is pre-process current. So that basically goes through the process of analyzing the current geometry in ZBrush. And then you can say, I want to simplify this geometry by 20% from what I have here. I'm going to actually go pretty low, like 1%, and click on decimate current. So 1% of 400,000 is 4,000, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's what I did. So now you have like these points. Let's see, enable that and turn off polyframe. And that's exactly what I want. So I want to have something that is very triangulated, with this almost like, mistakes in a way that makes it feel more organic and more real, not like super, not perfect in a way. So that is the idea with the decimation master. So that is another little tip that that you can use to create, interesting comic style renders. Let's go ahead and I'll show you the other one just for the sake of demo again. So this one right here has a couple of extra stuff that if you want to create really clean lines, I'm gonna show you how this is done. Exactly the same thing. This has been used, or like this is the same thing that I use for the other one. Just a sphere that I started pushing and pulling and adding the Sculptris Pro as well. But on top of that, if you look at here, the helmet, I have all of these details. So these details, because they are actually IMM brushes, they turn out to be really clean in the outline. So you have those really clean details that, again, you can sort of like fill with different colors and just make it a really, really interesting, it's just another technique. So the way that one works, there's not much to it really. You can use any IMM brush. So I'm just gonna use this as an example. Or let's actually use this sphere so that it's a little bit consistent with what I'm showing you. Yeah, so you can use something like the model kit, right? That comes with ZBrush. And I'm gonna click on this one, click and drag. And once you drag it, if in case you're not familiar with IMM brushes, once you drag this, it automatically masks out the rest of the model. So you can go to split. Let's go to split and split on mask points. And then now I have this, right, separate. And I can just go ahead and click on the dynamic subdivision. So with this one selected, geometry, and enabling dynamic subdivision. And that way you have like a cleaner outline if you want, and you can increase the amount of subdivision so that it's smoother. But yeah, once you have one, or once you have applied one, so I have two subtools, one with the sphere and one with this one, you can add other pieces like so. Maybe push this one in. I'm just gonna add one more like this one, just to create something like that. I want to click and drag to remove that mask. And if I turn to my comic style, you have some really nice, cool details. So this could work nicely for some sort of like mecha design, for instance, or like a robot or something. So that's really, really cool stuff. Daco is asking for how to add midtones to your comic material. I'm not sure if this is what you mean, but I did cover this just a few seconds ago, a few minutes ago. If you're using the Pablander Super Comic material, you can click on S3, and then you can play around with basically changing the values between depth A and B. So I can just add that. I don't know if that's what you mean, like a mid-tone. I assume that it is. So I'll just leave it like that so that you can see. So the other thing that I was, just to wrap up this additional tip, if you want to add like really, really clean lines, after you decimate your model, for instance, you can still use Sculptris Pro to maybe use the damp standard brush. Sorry, let's go to the sphere. You can still do that, right? So if I go back in here, you see as I create this line, it just adds geometry to it. So if you want to define certain, you know, maybe take these lines and say, oh, you know what, this is going to wrap around here like so, and this is going to be like a panel or something. You can totally do that, and you can do that with Sculptris Pro. However, I'm going to undo that. What I would recommend if you want to have like really, really clean lines after you decimate your model for this sort of look, you can use the curve tube. And the curve tube is just a simple brush that allows you to create curves like so. And that, as you can see, it creates a really clean, simple line. Now, by default, when you use the brush or this tube brush and you click and drag, it does it based on one single point. So as soon as you click here, this becomes kind of like the plane of this curve. So if I rotate around, you see this is kind of like in a flat plane. So the first thing I like to do when I'm using this brush is go to the picker palette right here and switch from 1C to continue C. So if I click on continue C, you can click and drag, and now this is going to follow the surface that you applied, or whatever you have, whatever volume you have in ZBrush, right? So this is really cool. And obviously the thickness of that tube is determined by the size of your brush. So I can go ahead and do this, right? Click another one. So, and then maybe connect this like that. And now we have these really nice and clean lines, you know, to play around with. Now, there's an extra little tip here that I'm going to give you with the curve brush. It doesn't really have anything to do with the comic style workflow, but it is something that, again, I shared it recently and not a lot of people knew about it. So I want to share it with you. It's something that has been in ZBrush for the longest time, but it's a pretty cool thing to do. So with the curve brush, if I go ahead and open up the brush palette, and you can go to the modifiers under the brush palette, this brush modifier, this number here, this value, will determine the amount of the resolution of that curve. So if I go ahead and enable the polyframe here, and I'm just gonna do it one more time. So right now this is, hang on, let me do it again. Right now this is what I have with this 20, with this value of 20. If I increase this value to 55 and click again, you see it just increases the resolution, the amount of you know, polygons that are around the tube. The same thing if you go lower than that. So if we go for 3, for example, and update it, it's going to be a triangle piece, or like a little triangle. So you can manipulate the resolution of the curve tube brush just using the modifiers in here. It's a simple slider. Pretty cool stuff. So now that I have this, maybe let's set it to 4. See what that gives me. So I have like a pretty clean line now. Okay, so that's kind of like what I want. Let's turn off the polyframe. So now with the same curve brush, I just edit that modifiers. I can do the same thing, right? And I will get a pretty clean line because it is ultimately a cube. Another thing that you can do with the curve tube for this type of thing is that you can play around with the depth, which is what I have here. Now the depth is as well in the brush palette. You can go to the depth and you can take this thumbnail and push it in or out, and that determines how embedded it would be on the surface. So if I push this in and go ahead and do the same thing, you'll see it is a lot more, let me switch back to this one, it's a lot more embedded into the surface, right? So this might be something interesting for you. And yeah, that's one more thing just to complete a series of tips with the brush, with the curve brush. If I go ahead and do this, you can hover over, and you see how my cursor changes from the red to this green or blue cursor. So I can press the spacebar and increase the draw size just to change the blue one. So you see the red one is the one that I use to edit or to create curves. But when I get closer, now my blue one, which is the draw size, and this is the one that I use to edit curves, is larger. So I can do this to manipulate, larger portions of the brush. I can also click on the curve to start editing, and if I press the Control key and drag, I can actually rotate sections of that curve. So just in case you want to do something more like a triangular piece, you can just do that, right? And if things are getting a little bit crazy in terms of like how you're moving it around, you can click and hold the Shift key, just like you use the smooth brush, and it will actually smooth the curve, right? So these are tips or techniques for brushes that use curve in general, not necessarily to the tube brush. You can do this with any curve brush. All right, so that's about it in terms of techniques and tips. If I go ahead and enable now, you see I have this really nice effect. I'm gonna go back to what I had here, 0.6 and 0.6. All right, so you see, these curve brushes and all of that gives you very, very clean and crisp lines. So this is basically what I use for all of that. So all of these details in here, those are curve brushes. All of this is curve brushes as well. So yeah, just different kind of like techniques applied in different ways for this type of comic style render. All right, let me just check the chat really quickly and see if I can answer any question. Feel free to drop them in there. Hey Daniel, thank you. Glad you'll be here. Trying. Cool. All right. All good. So yeah, so that's basically the rundown of how I build those things. Now let's go ahead and build. I'm going to show you how you can edit your own matcaps. Like I said, if you go to the ZBrush guides, and let me just show you as well. Those materials are free, and I do have them in here. So material, comic style. Yeah, so I have a bunch of these ones here. Most of these ones, if not all of them, actually are free in the ZBrush guide, so you can just go ahead and grab them. The modifiers of the curve are under the brush palette. So you open the brush palette, you go to modifiers, and this is where they are. That's the same modifiers for everything, really. So here in the ZBrush guides, if you go to resources, just scroll down. You can search for it like comic. Yeah, here we go. So you can search comic, click on comic materials, and this is like a section dedicated to just comic style stuff. So all of these ones are free. So all you have to do is just click on one and it will start downloading. It's just pretty easy. Yeah. Okay, so the next thing that I was gonna say was, let me just see the notes that I have here for today. Oh yeah, so let's go ahead and create our own sort of matcap just to show you how easy this is. So maybe we can use this this character, this one right here. I'm gonna use this one as my reference so that we can create a new one. So the first thing I would suggest you do is click on the material thumbnail and select a matcap. So you see how this is divided, or ZBrush has divided into two sub palettes. So this one right here are the matcaps. So these are all materials that use that image as a starting point or as a base. And then you have the standard materials. So the main difference between these two type of materials is that the matcaps have like the material, the lighting and the material information on the shading and all of that baked into an image. So that's what is called matcap or material capture. But the standard ones, they kind of like react to light. So if you change the lighting position, it will react to the highlights and all of that. So the first thing I would suggest is choose a matcap that you don't like because you will replace it until the next time that you restart ZBrush. So let's go ahead and take the most hated material in the world, the red wax, and I'm just going to replace that. But this one already has like some properties that that we can play around with. So you can do whatever you want. I would suggest to get rid of the red wax, but that's just me. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and open up Photoshop. Okay, and in Photoshop I have a document that is 1024 by 1024. You can go higher than that, but it's not needed. In fact, it could be just smaller than that because the image would be pretty small anyway. And I'm gonna go ahead and select a ellipse tool here. Click and drag. I'm gonna hold Shift just to make proportional editing of that. Press Enter, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and hold Control and T for transform, and I'm gonna make this fit exactly in the document. Right now, I'm gonna go ahead and change the stroke to nothing. and double click on this and say, you know what, this is going to be a black circle. Now, the background could be anything. I personally like to keep it as a neutral mid-gray. So you can select from the color picker. You can set this to 128, 128, and 128. That gives you a mid-gray, and then just fill that in. That's it. So we just have 2 layers in Photoshop. You can do this in Krita or GIMP, anything that you want. Any image editing software probably allows you to do the same thing, even Photoshop. Even Procreate. Now I just removed the stroke, so you'll see it is not touching the edges. I want to make sure that this, because this is the important part. I want to make sure that they are touching the edges of the image. Okay, that's a little bit better. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to duplicate this. And by the way, you can create a template. So once you finish with the setup, you can save this Photoshop file and come back to this at any time and tweak it and edit it. So I'm going to take the second one, double click on it, and I'm going to make it a, I don't know, let's go for a yellowish, kind of like a Wolverine type of thing. We're going to create something like that. All right, click OK. And then I'm going to bring in my Control T to transform that. And I'm going to hold the Alt key and just push this in, right? So this, just like this, nothing else, 2 simple circles. This already creates a pretty interesting matcap. So just to prove my theory, let's go ahead and save this. And I'm going to save it here on my computer, tips and tricks, comic. And I'm going to save it as a JPEG. Let's call it comic 01. Just a JPEG image. And now in ZBrush, I'm going to go ahead and in the wax, red wax material here, so this is the material palette, just open the modifiers, and at the bottom you have this image, right? And this is the one that the red wax is using to create the the volumes and the effect. So I'm going to click on that one, and I'm going to click on import. Let's go ahead and find that image, and I'm going to import that. And just like that, we now have a comic material. Obviously, this can be edited a little bit, and that's the whole portion or the whole editing part of it. But you already have some nice outline. We can get rid of this volume by just play around with this, but I'll show you that in a second. So now that you have a rough idea of how this works, we can go ahead and go back to Photoshop, and let's make the outline a little bit thicker. So I'm gonna reduce the size of the yellow circle like so. Let's go ahead and save that again. This time I'm going to save it as JPEG 2, or sorry, comic 02, just so you can see the difference. Let's go ahead and import that, and boom, we have a thicker line. Great. So we're getting there. Let's go back in here. I actually want to have a slight difference between, let's say, the thickness at the top and the thickness at the bottom. So all I'm going to do is take this yellow color and just push it up. And in fact, let's go ahead and squash it down a bit, like so. So basically, we're going to have like darker shadows towards the bottom and a thinner outline outside. So I'm going to save this as my 3rd iteration. And honestly, this is what I like to do when I'm trying to figure out something. I like to save the different stages of the things that I do and see what I find useful. Sometimes I push the limits and I think this doesn't work, and go back and change it. So this is the 3rd type, comic 3. There we go. So you see, you have a nice thin line towards the top of things, and then at the bottom, or where there should be a shadow, it's a little bit thicker. So this is pretty cool. Now at this point, we can go ahead and start playing around with some of the settings. However, I just want to show you something else before we move in. Actually, let's do it now. So with the depth A and B, this is kind of like the midtones technique. So you can add to it like so. That's pretty easy. But let's set it to 1. Because the modifiers of this material allow you to detect the cavities. So that's how you can get those inside crevices and cavities. That's this one right here. So if I set this to 0 and the cavity detection to 0, and let's go ahead and get closer here. I'm going to start by pushing the cavity detection all the way to 1 again, and then I'm going to push this one to 1. So that way you should be able to see. Let's go ahead and change the B to something else, like red, so that you can see. Okay, so this color right here, the A and B, you see that a lot of the sliders in here, they have A and B. So basically, you can change the color, you can change the intensity of like two values, right? So that's what the cavity detection does. So I'm pushing it to, I just created this red, by the way, just so that you can see, otherwise it will be kind of like pointless. But if I set it to -1, it's going to try to invert the effect. So you can think about it as a concave versus convex, just going positive values or negative values, right? So you see, if I go to 1, the red is kind of like outside, and this could be any color, by the way, right? Or if I go inner, oops, sorry, let's go ahead, not intensity, by cavity 1. Now this is kind of like inside, right? So if you want to add, you know, more intensity towards the crevices, you see the crevice here is getting this bluish green color. You can do that with this technique, and you can say, you know what, give me a black color, and that's going to be pretty intense. But then you can just go ahead and take the intensity of A, which is the white color, and you can just push that so that you can sort of override that. You know, it's kind of like adding contrast to it. The issue with this is that it obviously increases the intensity of the entire color of the material or the comic style. So I usually don't do that. I just like to play with the cavity transition. Let's set this back to kind of like a mid gray, and then we can play with the, I think the cavity, yeah, something like this. Should be fun. And then I'm going to reduce the cavity detection just a bit. Not interested in having that much. And let's go ahead and take the B actually and set it to white now, or almost white. I'm just going to play with the, I want to have a tiny bit of volume. I don't know if you can see it. It's barely visible in the stream, I think. But this is kind of like how you can start tweaking it. Anyway, that's not necessarily what I wanted to show you. Let's go back to Photoshop, because you can keep tweaking things from Photoshop. If you don't want to get into kind of like the advanced sliders here in ZBrush, you can totally do it from Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this now. So this is a new object. I'm going to double click on it, and I'm going to select the same yellow color, but I'm going to make it a bit lighter and maybe more yellowish. So this is going to be my highlight in a way. So I'm going to hold Control and T, and it's going to be, you know, the smaller the circle is, the more specular things are, right? So I can just go ahead and do something like this. And just to make it even more interesting and more fun, I'm going to duplicate the orange one. Sorry, the yellow one, duplicate that. I'm going to turn it off for a second. And this one that you can see, the second one, I'm going to make it actually more of an orangey tone. All right. And let's turn this back on. So again, just going back to what we, just kind of like a quick recap. We have the base. Now we have this orange one that is giving me, so this is kind of like the replacement for this yellow color. Then I have the same yellow color, but now I'm going to move it away. And I'm going to hold the Alt key, and I'm going to clip this layer to the red one. So the clipping, just holding the Alt key in between two layers, just make sure that you click in between, is going to restrict whatever I do in this layer to only the region that the layer below is using. So I can just move this around. So I'm going to push this one like so, maybe like this, so that we also have this nice orange color as an extra value in there. And then this is my highlight. Maybe you can push the highlight slightly to the left. Cool. So let's go ahead and save this. And this is how easy it is to make these matcap materials. I guess the most, I don't know, the complicated part is just to get it right and to play around with the placement of these things to make sure that it works. I've done this enough times, so I kind of like know where I'm going for, but you can just play around with this. And let's go back in here. I think ZBrush is saving. And let me just check the chat in the meantime. Did you mention I had a video on how to build the villain character? Oh no, that's just like a reel, like a story. I think I shared it in TikTok, because now I'm in TikTok sharing some videos. I think I shared it there, or in Instagram. So check my Instagram at Pablander, or TikTok, the same handle. I can't remember. It's just like showing a little bit of the process, but it's not like a tutorial necessarily. May 31st is the deadline, correct, Court? That's it. Let me just, is it possible to cross-hatch? Yes and no. So yes, I will show you that technique to do that. And no, because you cannot have Basically, if you have like a hatching technique or like a hatching in your comic matcap, is not going to look the same way that you expect unless you have just a sphere. But I'll definitely show you that in a second. All right, so I'm gonna update this with the one with the orange bit, and now we have like a really cool stuff, right? So yeah, that's basically all there is to it. You can play with the depth. I mean, we can just change this so that the highlight is a little bit less pronounced or more, but that is basically it, right? I mean, this is just like a yellow sort of material, but you can change that from the modifiers. Like I said, if you don't want to, if you want to keep everything within, let's say, Photoshop, you can just create a hue saturation value, for example, and just change it here to a blue color, save that one as a new image, and then do this and save that as a new image, and so on and so forth. I personally, I enjoy both, so it doesn't really matter. I don't have like a preference. But since I already have everything in here, what you can do is go to the hue here, and these are like modifiers in ZBrush, and you can change the hue of A and B. So you can just change that directly. So you can play around with this and then create something really cool. So I'm gonna try to go for maybe like a blue. Something like that. Yeah, it's not too bad. But you see, it's using exactly the same matcap. So the material capture is just this, but it's changing that on the fly from the ZBrush modifiers. All right, so I'm gonna set this back to 0. I think this looks quite good. But you see, oh, I don't know what I replaced then. I thought I replaced the matcap material. Anyway, maybe I had to. All good. All right, so the next thing that I want to show you, hang on, let me just check the chat. Samuel, do you render in ZBrush or Substance Painter? For the comic style, I do everything in ZBrush. So I just do, I'll actually show you that as well. Substance Painter is mostly for a texture authoring. So I would do like more realistic textures in there rather than this. But for the comic style, I do everything in ZBrush, because I'll show you why as well. Now I'm gonna go back to my comic matcap or my super comic material to show you the hatching technique and how you can sort of increase details and all of that in something like that. So once you have your base sculpt, let's say that you're happy with this as a starting point, you can go ahead and turn on the comic style and see, okay, this actually is working fine, but I want to go ahead and add some details and maybe some of that hatching lines, little kind of like extra, I would say like line mistakes or line, not mistakes, but I don't know how to call it, just like the hatching effect. But yeah, I would say like the quality of line, you can make it a bit more sketchy if you wanted to. So what I like to do, I'm going to use a custom brush as well. You can use, by the way, if you're following along, you can use the damp standard brush by all means, and that works just fine. I would recommend just maybe increasing the intensity, but I'm going to use another custom brush. You can use either this Paulander Slash. This is actually in ZBrush Guides, actually. Let me just show you where that is. So again, resources, and you go to sculpting brushes. So type sculpting brushes. So you click on sculpting brushes, and it should be here. Maybe I haven't uploaded it. I'll try to do that. But basically, or you can use the Geo brush actually. So this is another brush that I made that it's quite good for this purpose, and that's also in the ZBrush Guides. But this Paulander Slash, that it's just a very strong slash, as you can see, right? It's a pretty strong one. You can reduce that and then create these very strong lines. But the one that I want to use is actually this Geiger coda. That Geiger coda is part of another brush pack called the Geiger and Beksinski brushes pack. Where is it? Here. So this is just another set of brushes. This is the one that I use. It's kind of like my go-to brush instead of the damp standard nowadays, just because it is pretty strong and it also gives you a lot of control. So with this brush, I can do kind of like the same thing, but the harder that I press, you see it's pretty strong effect. So this is the thing that I would use to add details and that sort of cross-hatching effect to a model like that. But I would do it based on the comic, right? So the first thing I like to do, in case you want to save your, let's say your clean mesh or your clean sculpt, is to open layers or sculpting layers, click on new, and then anything that you do here in terms of hatching or changing the stroke, it will be recorded in a layer. So I'm gonna reduce this size, and I'm just literally going to start adding the hatching effect directly as a sculpting bits, right? So that way when I move the camera, it's still in there. So again, this, and I can kind of like refine some of the folds, like so. And this is a lot of fun to do. Maybe we need more resolution, so I'm gonna subdivide this one more time. And obviously this depends on the style that you want to go for. And the harder that you press, the more embedded obviously things will be. So yeah, this is just another technique. And I quite enjoy this. So I could spend a lot of time just refining the lines like so. So just want to show you. So you see, these are actually tiny little details that have been sculpted. So when you rotate things around, they stay with it. So they're not part necessarily of the material, but because everything is recording in a layer, I can say, you know what, I want a cleaner line, right? I can go ahead and turn this off, and those lines are off. Oh, I forgot to create a layer for this. That's okay. So yeah, so just remember to create a layer. Now, if I switch back to the basic material, you'll see that the model itself is not great, right? It's just like messy. But this is like the important thing to kind of like let go. If you're kind of like used to working on clean meshes or trying to get a sculpt that looks really, really cool, this is an important sort of mind frame that you have to switch to. That it's okay to let go, because we're not trying to create a perfect sculpt. We're just creating something that could be used as a 3D object to create a line work. So that's the idea. So even though it looks messy as a 3D sculpt, when you turn into a comic sort of style, it looks pretty good. Now another thing you can do is, and this is covered in the ZBrush for Illustrators course that I mentioned earlier. Let me see. There we go. So I have some of these brushes that are hatching brushes, and these are just for poly paint as well. Some of them are. So I'm gonna double click on this one, and this one is not for poly paint. This one actually adds. Let's create a new layer. So this one allows you to add this sort of like hatching effect straight away. So in this one, I just show you how. I mean, in the comic style, not sorry, the ZBrush for Illustrators course to create comics, I show you how to create your own brushes like this. But you can create any brush really to create this effect. And again, it's just like sculpting the mesh, so you can create that effect that stays with the model as you rotate and maybe take like different shots, different angles for your comic style render. So yeah, those brushes are in there. Let me see if yeah, okay. So this is another brush. This one is kind of like a Sharpie. So I'm gonna fill the object with white, create a new layer. Don't have to create a new layer. Hang on. I'm gonna bake that. Okay. Sorry. So I just fill this entire object with a white color, and then I'm gonna select in black, and this is kind of like a Sharpie brush. So you can do the same sort of like hatching effect with poly paint if you want something a bit more defined, and you don't want to have, for instance, see how like in this case right here, I have that embedded, or like I have that as a sculpted detail, so it is actually changing the this I don't know, there's the shadows sort of like it's adding highlight to the shadow. That makes sense. So you can do it with poly paint and avoid that, or you can just sort of like refine certain areas like that, for example, if you want. So you can do both. You can do poly paint, little hatching techniques like that, or you can do it directly on the model. And both have the same sort of benefit, that if you decide to do another render from a different angle, they will stay there and they will be visible from different angles. All right, so that is in terms of hatching. Now let's go ahead and move on into the rendering bits with filter, because I think we're already an hour into this stream, and this is kind of like the last thing that I have prepared for today. And then I'll just do a little Q&A. If you have questions, I'm happy to show you some bits and pieces. All right, so let's go ahead and use maybe this guy here. All right, I'm gonna find a nice sort of angle here. And I'm using this comic style, but I'm gonna switch back to the basic material, right? Now, I'm gonna give you another, I'm gonna do another plug for some of my stuff online, but you don't have to have them. I'm gonna show you how to build your own, but in case you wanna play around with it, it is also available in the ZBrush guides. So you can go to filters, you can, sorry, this is what I already have. Let me just show you what it is. So you go to resources here. You can type filters. Filter. This is the one. So it is, it is a simple set of filters to turn basically any 3D object into a sort of like sketch or comic style. And some of these examples here we go. This is the one that I'm showing you right now, right? So you can create this out of a 3D mesh. So it is pretty fun. And again, there might be a different style that you're going for, not necessarily comic style, but I want to show you some of the hatching things. So I'm going to double click on this one right here, the sketchy lines, and that would load the file. So if I open now my render palette, so all of these filters have been loaded. So that's what I kind of like set up in that set of filters. And I can go ahead and click on render. Let's go ahead and press Shift and R. And we have this nice, clean line just with this. And these are rendering effects, or something that you don't have to worry about, like, materials or anything like that. It's just you work on whatever material you want. It doesn't matter which one it is. And then when you render from whatever angle, it's going to be, it's going to apply that filter. So all I'm doing is rotating the camera. I'm pressing Shift R to render. So that gives you a very clean line, right? Now I'm gonna bring in some of the other, just to show you, because they're pretty fun. So this is like a clean sketch, like a pencil sort of sketch, and you can just turn this on and off, all of these filters, to see what they do. I want to show you another one of my favorites. This is like a blue pencil with shadows. This is another clean blue pencil. This is another one. There's one of my favorites because it does feel like a real sketch, like a pencil sketch. So it's a lot of fun. Just thought I mentioned this in case you want to use it, but I'm going to show you how to create your own sort of comic style for this. That's basically what we're talking about. All right, so just to reset these filters, again, these are just things that happen at render time. So it doesn't matter what you work with, it doesn't matter what material you're using. When you render from a different angle, you get the same sort of effect, right? Which is really, really cool. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on filter, and I'm going to find a filter here. Lightbox and filter. So this will open up the filter folder in ZBrush that has the lightbox. This one is the one that I'm looking for, default. So I'm going to double click on that, and that basically gets rid of all the filters. It's just the easiest way to go back to zero. So now if I render, what I get is just a normal render. All right, so now that we have this as a clean slate, let's say, we can start playing around with some of them to create a comic material without using any pre-made material like the comic, the Pablando Super Comic or anything like that. So what I want to do is I'm going to enable F1. So I'm going to select it. You see that you can select them, and basically the orange one is the one that you have selected, and obviously all the settings here will be dedicated to each one of these that you select. But to turn them on, basically you have to click on this little circle. So now this one is selected and it's on. So the only reason I mention this is because if you haven't used this before, it might be a little bit counterintuitive when you go and say, okay, this is giving me this effect, but I'm going to switch to this one, and you'll see that this is still on, but you cannot change this one. So you have to enable them and make them on and off So I just thought I mentioned that. All right, so the first one, by default, is going to give you this noise. Hopefully you can see if I turn this on and off. It just gives you a little bit of a noise. That's not what I want. I'm going to start playing around with some of them. So the first switch here, or drop down, I'm going to go ahead and change to material shading. So material shading is one of my favorites because it allows you to apply whatever material you want on top of any render. And I'm going to make sure that the material shading is set to 100. So we have 100% contribution of the material that we choose. And to choose the material, we can click on this texture. And we can set, let's say, this one that we created before, right? The yellow one, just for fun. So if I rotate around, I'm still working with the basic material. But if I render from this angle, when it's rendering, it's going to apply that material on top, or it's going to be the new material. So it is pretty fun. So let's do another render. And I'm actually going to change this to... Let's just start with something pretty basic. I'm going to go for flat, right? So this gives me a flat image, like a shadeless version. And yeah, I think this is pretty good already. I'm going to go ahead and click on the second one. And to be honest, I didn't plan this bit. I mean, the plan that I have for today was just to show you this. So I don't have, I'm just like winging it here. So we'll see where we get to this in this stream. All right, so the second one, I just enabled it. I'm gonna go for, I think I'm gonna go for contrast auto gray, or any of these contrast auto colors or user auto colors. They're gonna give you different variations of how contrast the image would be. So I'm gonna click on auto gray, and that you see, it just adds a little bit of contrast, so on and off. And I do this, by the way, all the time. When I'm building my own filters and this sort of thing, I just go ahead and click this on and off to see exactly what it's doing. And then I like to push things quite a bit. So I'm going to take the contrast auto gray value, which is currently at 50. I'm going to push it all the way to 100 and see what it does. So I think that looks pretty good. Yeah, I think it's giving me a pretty good contrast, right, before and after. And the cool thing is that in a way it's non-destructive, because if I can continue, if I continue building the look and I decide, you know what, I actually like the nice subtle shading that this gives me, I will just turn this off and continue. But for now, I think I like it. Let's go ahead and go to F3 or filter 3, enable that, and I'm going to click on, not sharpen, let's see. I think for this, I'm going to start adding or bringing in some lines, some outlines. So I'm going to click on outline cavity, and that already gives me a nice outline. You see that this value here, this is in -50, but you also have this back color and this front color. This is pretty cool because you can click on the front color and say, give me a red color, just so that you can see it. And the back color, give me a blue color, right? So this is one of the ways I created that nice outline of the sketchy blue line. So the 50% means that you see that the slider is not right in the middle. So it's 50 out of 100, but it's -50. Basically, the middle one is 0. That's what I'm trying to say. So you can go all the way to blue, to -100. So it's very, very blue, or all the way to 100 in red. So that's how you can, play around with these things. So I'm just going to go for the red one, and you can leave the blue as it is. It doesn't matter. And I'm going to make this a black color. So now we have this black line. So if I turn this on and off, you see this makes quite a big difference in terms of the comic style render. The next thing that I like to do is you can actually edit the quality of this line, not just by changing the intensity, but changing the thickness and all of that. So that would be under the modifiers. So the modifiers for this specific filter. So I'm going to click on filter, modifiers, and we have exterior cavity, we have interior cavity. You can add both. I personally like to split them into 2 filters, so we'll do that after. So we're going to concentrate on exterior cavity. The cavity radius, that's essentially your thickness. So I can make it really, really thick, but that's sort of like, ruins the look. So I'm going to go for cavity 2. And the fall-off is basically the detection, in a way, like the detection of how concave or how convex the volumes are. So this is kind of like the easiest way to explain it, just to show you. So if I reduce it, you see it becomes more evident, all those lines. If I push it forward, you kind of like start cleaning this up, right? So I think I'm going to go for a 1.8. So you see before and after here. It's just adding that nice outline, and it's sharpening things quite a bit. Now let's go ahead and open up another one. You can keep playing around with this, but I think this works fine. I'm going to enable F4, and I'm gonna go for cavity outline again. Actually, instead of cavity outline, let's go for outline edge. No, cavity outline. Like again, I don't have a plan necessarily. So cavity outline, but this time I'm gonna use the modifiers. Like I said, I want to control them separately. Turn off exterior, enable interior. So you see, as soon as I do that, there's a little bit of contrast in the inner lines. I'm gonna push this all the way to -100 just so that it grabs the black color I already have in here. I'm gonna reduce the cavity noise, and then the sensitivity is basically how much detection there is. So now it's pretty sensitive for the interior lines. Again, that sort of like ruins the look. So you have to find a nice balance. I think this one is actually pretty good. Just adding maybe 3.2. The radius is fine, and I'm gonna play with the fall off just to add more contrast to it, and maybe increase the intensity just a tiny bit. The way that I see this cavity intensity and fall off when I'm playing with the interior cavity is almost like a brightness and contrast. So one just add more brightness to visualize more of the inner lines, and the other one sort of adds more contrast. Okay, so this one is already giving us something that looks super decent. So let's go ahead and turn this on and off. There we go. So we have the interior cavity, we have the exterior cavity, and we have the contrast. And then this is the one giving us the shade. So only 4 shaders or 4 slots in here, filters, already give us something that looks pretty decent. I'm gonna change the angle, Shift R, pretty good. I'm gonna test this out with another model. Pretty good. Shift R. And this is something that I also do quite often, just to test out the consistency and the quality of the filters, so that it's not just going to look good in one model, but in general with any model that I use. All right, so let's go ahead and click on F5 to enable that. And what I want to do is maybe add a bit of sharpness to it. So I'm going to click on sharpen, and that sharpens the lines. I'm going to push it all the way to 100. Yeah, I think that looks cool. And I think that looks all right. One thing is that you might notice that the shadow here, it's too intense. That might be something that you want to go for, but if you wanted to, I just want to show you how you can edit that. So let's go ahead and enable F6 or filter 6. I'm going to click the filter, and I'm going to go, let's go for colorize. I think that one, actually not colorize, but paint. Let's go for paint. So paint allows you to add a fill color in anywhere you want. So the same thing that or the same sort of like concept of the positive and negative values with the color. So I'm gonna go all the way to 100 and use this front color. Let's go for a darker gray, so it's not fully black and not fully gray. And obviously that sort of covers the entire render, right? But what we can do is a couple of things. We can go here to these sliders, which we haven't touched at all, and we can use this mask. So the mask will use the mask that ZBrush renders with anything, and if you push it all the way to 1, it sort of like restricts the effect of this filter to only that mask region. And if you want to know what that mask is, again, this is something that ZBrush does by default, but you can just go to the render passes, and you'll see this is the mask that is being rendered. So this is literally the image that ZBrush is using to restrict the effect of this filter. And then you also have the shadows, you have the depth, you have all of those things that you can enable from the render properties. But again, that's not necessarily the focus of today. So now we have restricted this fill or gray color to this area, but I want to restrict it also to the shadows. So you have this slider here that it says shadow. I'm going to click on that one and push it all the way to 1. So now you see that it's not only restricted to the the alpha, but it's also restricting to the areas that are casting a shadow. So if I go like this and render this out, oh sorry, I forgot that this is a matcap. All right, so you see the shadow, whenever I render this, whenever I have this cast shadow, is going to be the gray color. And it doesn't have to be gray. You can just make it red. So whatever you want. You can create like really crazy, cool, filters. That actually, this one is not too bad, actually. It's interesting. So yeah, you can do that. However, what I wanted to do was set it to maybe gray, like so. Maybe a little bit darker. All right. And the reason I'm doing that is just to show you how you can control how you can use these filters to target certain areas of your render. So basically what I've done, just as a recap, is to target the entire object with the mask and then the shadow to just this area. Now, let's go ahead and do something even more fun with this. So I'm going to enable F7, enable that, and I'm going to search for another filter, which is, I'm going to go for, which one would be a good one? Let's go for screen dots. Yeah, this one will be cool. All right, so this is just basically giving me those dots. And you see, one of the cool things about this filter by default when you add it is that based on the contrast and the brightness of the colors that you already have based on the previous filters, right, is adding like the size of those dots. So I can leave it like this and just create like some kind of retro, I don't know, for a screen or something. That'll be cool, right? And this is just a filter that is overriding everything else, right? But let's go ahead and tweak it a bit. So the screen dots, this slider this time changes the strength. So if I push it all the way to 100, not the strength, sorry, the size of the dots. So if you want to reduce the size, you can just change that. I think I'm gonna go for, yeah, 20 was fine actually. And then you have the modifiers. So the modifiers allow you to change a few things. So if I click on inner transparent, so you see, maybe increase this, so this one is going to be a bit more obvious. So if I click on inner transparent, anything that is anything that is a circle will be transparent. So I click on that. So you see, it's transparent. It's kind of like adding I don't know, like a panel that has holes on top of it. So you can see a little bit of the object behind it. Or I can do the other way around. I can say outer transparent. So anything that is not a circle will be transparent, right? So I think this is the one that I'm going to go for. But before I do that, I also want to show you can match the intensity of the color underneath. So if you enable that, you see it's kind of like a pixelation. It's kind of, yeah, it's a fun thing to do. I love playing around with this because every time that you try something, you might find a new way of using these filters. So I'm going to match the intensity. This doesn't really matter because I'm going to try to target this or place it in the shadows. So let's go ahead and click on outer transparent as well. So we now have these dots floating around. The constant size, this is again based on the intensity. So you can click on use constant size and all of them will be the same size, but I kind of like the fact that, you know, some of them are larger than others. All right, so now that you can see really what those modifiers do for this filter, I'm going to reduce the screen size, screen tone a bit more. Maybe something like that. And the next thing that I want to show you is that you can actually use blending modes for each one of the filters, which again is something that we haven't done. So it's another level of control that you have. So if I click on the blending mode here, right now it's set to replace normal. Let's go ahead and try multiply, just like in Photoshop. And we just now multiplied those black dots or that color on top of it. So as it is, I think looks pretty nice. If you want, we can restrict, let's say, I don't know if you can see, but there are some dots. There are some dots kind of like outside of the outline. If you like it, I kind of like it because it's, you know, it's more like a rough sketch. But if you don't, all you have to do is go to mask and say, give me 100% of that mask. So you clean that line as well. And I want to restrict this one closer to the darker areas. So you can go to shadow. Again, if I go all the way to 100, it's only going to add those dots in the shadow. But I want to mix it up a little bit so that it's not 100%. So you can go for just a tiny bit. So you have 100% of those circles in here, and then you have a little bit more around there. And now that I know where I'm placing these dots, I can also reduce the dots a bit more, just to make it a bit more interesting. There we go. I think the size actually is more important. There we go. All right, not too bad. Let's go ahead and do another angle. Cool. So that's pretty much it, really. I mean, you can keep playing around with things, you know, adding more effects to it, and it's just a lot of fun. I'm gonna do one more. So F8. Let's render this out. So this could be. Let's see what other one could be interesting to show you. We can go ahead and add a texture, although it doesn't really work that well with. Oh, actually. yeah, let me just show you. So you can do texture. And let's go ahead and do a hatching effect for rendering. So I'm going to use this. Actually, let's duplicate this. And I'm going to make this a white background. And I'm going to use just a simple brush to create a hatching effect. I don't know. This, like I said, I've done this before, so I kind of like know what I'm going with this, but this might not work. So something like this will be okay. I'm doing this very, very quickly because I know that we're already over time. And I'll just finish up with this. So I'm going to call this one hatch effect or lines, and that's it. All right, I'm going to show you this. And guys, if you want to prepare your questions, like I said, I'm going to do a tiny little Q&A in just a second. So feel free to drop them in there. But I'm going to go back in here. And in this filter, just as a recap, I use the texture filter. So now I'm going to go ahead and click on texture here. And I'm going to import that hatching effect, those lines. There we go. So you see, it just gets added everywhere, right? So if you have something that has, that is a tileable texture, it's much better, as you can see. But in this case, it doesn't matter. So the texture value, this is the size, just like the dots. So you can increase or decrease that. You can go to modifiers and say, okay, give me transparent but in black or not at all. So whatever is black is going to be transparent or not. So you can play around with this. I think I'm just going to leave this at 0 so that I can multiply this. So let's replace this for multiplied, just like I did with the dots. But one of the cool things about this filter is that you can use this orientation and orientation count. So the base orientation is 0, meaning that we're just projecting that image from the camera. But as soon as I click on one or a little bit more of this, there we go. There we go. Hang on, sorry. I was like hearing myself from somewhere. So yeah, the base orientation is just like how you rotate that based on the camera. And then the orientation count is going to look at how many shades or how many variations in brightness or color you have in your underlying mesh, and it's going to wrap that texture based on that. So I'm going to set this to 3, and you see it's kind of like hard to see, but you see inside the model. In fact, let's go ahead and restrict that to mask so you can see better. So you see how like the rotation is starting to happen based on the amount of variation in brightness. So I would recommend go for a low value here, because if you just increase that quite a bit, it's going to be a lot of noise, which might be something that you want. So I'm going to go for 3. I think 3 is maybe 4. Nah, 3 is fine. So it's basically looking at 3 levels of, or 3 gray values in a way. And every time there is a change, maybe if you look at it here, so you see, it's kind of hard to see, but every time there is a change in value, then the rotation is changing again, right? So that is the idea with it. All right, so obviously this is starting to look good, but it doesn't look great because it's everywhere. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna restrict the application of these lines, but to the outline or to the, I would say the glazing angles of this volume. And that is done with the Fresnel effect. So the Fresnel is this one right here. And yeah, the Fresnel effect is just that sort of effect that kind of like, the glazing angles of a volume really. So I'm gonna push this all the way to 1. And now you see that everything is kind of like pushed towards the edges of the volumes. But it doesn't, it doesn't work 100% because there's like a fade, and we're still using this at 100%. So that's why these sliders on the right hand side are for. So you have the mask, the Fresnel, the shadow, all of that, and then each one of these one have a corresponding exponent slider. So this is basically to help you, increase contrast or push the effect of the Fresnel in this case. So I'm going to take the Fresnel exponent here. I'm going to push it. Hang on. Yeah, I'm going to push it to negative values just so I can see a tiny bit of that. I'm going to actually change this to minus. Nah, let's go for 1. So toward the glazing angles. And then just push this in. Something like that. I think that's pretty cool. And then I'm just going to add a little bit more contrast to it. So let's see in the modifiers. not the modifier, sorry. The let's add another filter actually. So that's all I want to do for this. I'm going to click on F9. I'm going to add a contrast user color, and I'm going to push that all the way to 1, and I'm going to use the front color, this one, to be gray. Sorry, to be white. All right. So basically, the contrast slider gives me that really strong contrast, and then the color, depending on the value that you choose, is going to add or is going to create that contrast based on that value. But obviously, I lost a lot of the things here in the shadow. So one thing we can do, there's a couple of things actually. We can just simply go to opacity, which is something that we haven't touched on, and just reduce the effect of that filter. But that obviously reduces the effect of the entire thing, which defeats the purpose. But just like I did with the shadow, I can restrict the shadow in the opposite direction, right? So I want to restrict this in the opposite effect of the shadow. So I can click on shadow and do -1. So it's going to apply this effect everywhere except in the shadow. Pretty cool. Yeah, so this is a really cool thing to do. And as you can see, there's just a bunch of sliders. And that's pretty much it. I think I'm going to leave it here because this is quite fun. So I could just waste a lot of time here just playing around with different options. Oh, by the way, one extra tip here. Once you have created your set of filters that work, so you have your base model and you go ahead and you render it, you can actually create, let's say, a turntable that has the effect. So just need to make sure that you render first, and then you can just go ahead and click on movie and click on turntable, and it's going to start creating a turntable, applying the effect. So this is how you can create a quick presentation render of your comic in 3D, and it's a pretty impressive thing to show, in social media and stuff. So just an extra tip in case you want to do it. There you go. I'm gonna stop it here. Cool. All right. So let me know, guys, if you have any questions at all. Oh, by the way, I did say that I want to show you like the mock-up of these things. I don't know if you're interested in this. This is kind of like more like a presentation thing that I did. So I took like my favorite sort of illustration images that I've done in this sort of like comic style, and I just put them inside like these mock-ups of like graphic novels. As it makes me feel like an accomplished published author. But they're just illustrations in mock-ups of books. So the way that I did this one is just a very simple scene in Blender. You can do this in anything. It's just Blender is really easy for this. I'll just show you how simple this is. So it's just a little corner of a room. This one right here, a very simple corner of a room. I made a very simple textures and with red, yellow, and blue, kind of like following the same colors that I use for my Virtuoso character, or like a Superman palette, basically. This is my window. This is just to create, it's on 3 planes, just to create a little bit of a cast shadow, an interesting shadow. And I do have 1 and 2 different lights and a camera. That's pretty much it, really. The rest is just like arranging these books, and these are the books basically that I created. I was going to do open books and all of that, but it didn't really work because I didn't have any content. They were just like images for the background anyway. Sorry, or for the cover. So everything is close. The way that I created these ones is pretty simple. I'm gonna show you. I know this is super basic, guys, but I just wanted to cover it anyway. I'm not the most proficient artist here in Blender. I know that's probably easier and fastest way of doing this, but I just used a cube and I scaled it to roughly the shape of a book. So this will be like the pages. Then I went ahead and click on Shift D to duplicate. Then went into edit mode, and then if you press Alt S with everything selected, it's going to scale based on the normals. So I just scale this up a little bit, and then I just remove, selecting the faces here. I'm gonna press X, delete faces. So now I have a single-sided kind of like object here. So I'll just do it here at the top so you can see, right? So it's a very simple plane, and to add thickness to it, I use this plugin. But you can use modifiers. So I use this plugin. It's called Hard Ops. It's really cool. So I just need to click on Shift Q, I think. Yep. and click on solidify, and you can do that. Because this one is not doing it like uniformly everywhere. You just need to apply the, because remember, this was just a cube and I just squish it. So I'm gonna hold Control A and apply all. So that just applies the transformation. So now it should work better. So I just add a little bit of thickness here. And then after doing this, I add a little bit of bevel to it, just to add this roundness to it. And that's it. And then obviously these are just modifiers. So if I open the modifiers here in Blender, I have the bevel and solidify. So you can do this manually. So you can just click on add modifier, search for solidify, add it yourself. I just use the plugin because it's a little bit faster for me to do this. But these are the two tools. And at the end of the day, if you toggle them off, this is still a single-sided mesh. So you can just go ahead and select everything. Go ahead and say UV unwrap. That's it. And then this is one of the covers that I did for the character Virtuoso. So I can just go ahead and apply it. So this is the UV map. I'm gonna rotate it. And this is gonna be the cover. It's not, I mean, it doesn't have to be super precise. I'm stretching things here and there, right? And then I can just go ahead and apply that cover. I think this is the cover anyway. Maybe not. Hang on. No. All right, makes sense. So I'm just editing the UVs. I know this is like super easy and basic, guys, but I just wanted to show you that you don't have to do complicated things to make things look interesting. All right, that was flipped. Cool, so it is a single-sided mesh, but because I have these two modifiers, then I have this nice cover, and then I also add the texture for the books, and obviously you can play around with the roughness and all of that. So anyway, that is how I set it up. Right, this is my entire room, and this is the render here. So I'm gonna enable render. So this is the camera, and I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off. So I'm using an HDR image just to give me this sort of like initial general ambient light, right? And then I have the main light. Let's go ahead and bring that in. So this is coming from the window. It is not very obvious, but there's some kind of like, you know, the blockers or the things that I use for the window frame are contributing to this. So this is the main sort of like key light, I would say. And then I have another light. Let's turn this off. So this is kind of like helping with the ambient light. So you see, it just focalizes the attention kind of like in the center. But it's incredibly simple, really. It's just a couple of lights, one from the right-hand side from the window and another one filling the gaps. But this is a really cool thing to do because once you have this template, you can just go ahead and play around with the camera position and, you know, say, okay, I'm going to show you. Oh, by the way, the depth of fill that you see here, that's another cool thing. Again, if you know about Blender, you know all this stuff, but I'm just going to show you anyway. So I have this little, this thing right here. So you can create an empty. This is an empty. You can go ahead and click on Shift A, go to empty and click on plane axis. That's what I have here. And then you can select your camera. And if you go to the properties of that camera here, scroll down and it has this depth of field. So you enable that and you click on what is the focal point, or what's the object that you want to focus on. So you can click and check that empty. So that way, if you pay attention here to the, let's collapse this. Oh no. Oh, I messed it up. Hang on. All right, so if you pay attention to this one here, if I take this now, I can just grab, like press G to grab, and I can move it around, and you see how it just gets in or out of focus, so you can animate that as well. So I'm just gonna place this here now, so that this cover is in focus. Or if I just go ahead and do, you know what, let's focus on the Ficodorus Chronicles. This is the illustration that I did for another video. So let's go ahead and, it's almost on the same line anyway, so we focus on this. And then I can just move around and it's always going to be in focus, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so if you have any questions, guys, feel free to put them in the chat. I think that sort of like covers what I wanted to share with you in today's live stream. Hopefully all of these tips and tricks have been of help. but do let me know. Happy to answer anything last minute, or not last minute, but anything that you're interested in. Cool. Let's have a look at the chat. Oh, I've missed a few. Sorry, guys. Hello. Greetings from Argentina. Hey, Case. Greetings from Colombia. How you doing? Wait, just the mockup? I thought, oh, yeah, no, it's just a mockup. By the way, this one that I have here doesn't have the other objects. Let me see. I'll show you the miniatures. It's the same sort of file, really. Let's go into rendering. There we go. So what I've done here is I took the different models that I use for this this harvester thing, the illustration. This is the one, like I said, from the series for illustrators, workshop. So basically, let me do this again. I show you this at the beginning. So this is the final image. That's what I use as a texture. This is the line work, pretty much following what I show you today on building filters and custom materials and all of that. And these are the objects. So this is a really cool thing of kind of like an advantage of creating these things in 3D, right? Rather than just like doing them as a sketch. So I have the models for the character, and I have the models for this mothership thingy. So I just exported as an OBJ, I think, and I think I optimized them using the Decimation Master, and that's basically what I have here. So I have this. I created a simple material that has a bit of translucency, just to emulate that gray resin for like 3D print, and I created those, bases and stuff. But yeah, it is exactly the same thing it's exactly the same model that I use for the illustration, but now it's like, it's a cool presentation way of showing the different models. So yeah, I did the same thing with this guy, with Lizardo. I think it's called Dracilio. So I'm rubbish with names, I know, but like Dracilio, this guy is just like lizard backwards. So lizard, almost, yeah, lizard backwards, and I just added this IO at the end, so it's Dracilio. Anyway, so this is the character. This is the model that I just showed you in Blender, exactly the same thing. So just another way of presenting or repurposing assets. So I exported this as an FBX or an OBJ, added a base here, and I just created that render that sort of has him as a main kind of like feature piece, and then at the background the image that I render. So this is done all in ZBrush and Photoshop. So I just rendered this and did some tricks in Photoshop. Actually, one last thing that I should mention about this, you'll see that this image has that sort of dots and highlights with like little dots patterns. That's just a brush that comes with Procreate. So I finalized the color in Procreate and added those hints in there. But yeah, nothing too crazy, I suppose. Cool. Anything else, guys? Greetings from Brazil. Awesome. Glad that you liked the demo. How do you fill the covers with those pages? I think you can just scroll back a little bit. I just literally just show you that, how to do that. Cool. No worries. Thanks, Christian. All right, guys. So I'm going to leave it here. Thank you so much for joining the live stream. And again, if you want to participate in the comic, actually, before I let you go, if you want to participate in the comic challenge, I want to share like the awesome sponsors that we have, which are Realution, let me just show you the prices because they're pretty awesome. So Realution, I've worked with these guys for a long time now, and they're just absolutely fantastic. So these guys are offering the character creator license full license for the winners. So you will be able to create all of this stuff with Character Creator, which is a really awesome software. I know some of you guys that are here, most of the extra mailers, you have access to that. So it is a really fun software. If you win the challenge, we have like 3 licenses to give away. And also the other sponsor that is absolutely fantastic is Victionary. So this is not Victionary. Oh, yeah, it is. So Victionary is a fantastic, like the quality is impressive, and they sell books, right? So we have codes so that you can buy virtually any book, I think like within a range, but it covers the shipping as well. So if you win, you can order any book that you want. This is a book that I collaborated with. I have it next to me. Anyway, so this is just about sci-fi art. So I have a couple of images that I've done in sci-fi style published in this book, and that's really how I got to know these people. But they're like, the quality is amazing. Like as a hard book, it's just really cool to have something physical with some nice pictures. So you can order this one or any other similar. There's one that if you're into creatures that you might like, which is this one. Yeah, it's really awesome. I'm gonna order this one, by the way. So you have like all these insect stuff. Anyway, so those are the sponsors for the challenge. So there's like some really cool, really cool prizes up for grabs. So it's free. So all you have to do is just join the Discord channel and start posting your stuff in there. And the deadline, once again, we still have like 20 odd days. So it's the 31st of May, so that you have plenty of time to create your entry. All right, cool guys. So like I said, I'm gonna leave it here. Thank you so much for joining, and